Studies show that 100% of everybody in the world wants to curl up indoors and do nothing because it's so darn cold out there. That's why many people are turning to Bombas, whose pillowy plush slippers and warm merino wool socks have been said to be the most comfortable in the history of feet. Bombas products have been found to boost coziness by up to 1,000,000%. Okay, enough fake statistics, but could Bombas socks and slippers really be the cure? Go to bombas.com/audio and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO.
The T-Biz podcast delivers tea news that you need to know. A recap of the week's major headlines with commentary and cultural trends hosted by Dan Bolton. It is the voice of origin for tea professionals and enthusiasts worldwide.
Each year, the T-Biz portal publishes the State of the Tea Industry Forecast, a forward-looking assessment of production, pricing, trade, and demand. We invite tea professionals across the value chain to review the findings and contribute their perspective. Your insights help refine the forecast before it is finalized on March 1st.
Hello, everyone. Here are this week's headlines. Hormuz shockwaves reshape global tea trade and freight risk. U.S.-India trade pact could reopen U.S. market access for Indian tea. And DMCC reveals new details on a 600-meter Uptown Dubai Megatall tower. Plus, tea discovery drives retail growth. Few specialty retailers have expanded as successfully or as thoughtfully as the Spice and Tea Exchange. Founded during the depths of the 2008 financial crisis, the brand has grown from a single shop in St. Augustine, Florida, into a nationwide franchise with more than 90 locations. At the heart of that growth is CEO and co-founder Amy Freeman, whose approach combines entrepreneurial discipline with a strong belief in hospitality, storytelling, and sensory detail. Instead of standardizing stores into uniform outlets, Freeman has created a model that promotes local experimentation, community engagement, and hands-on exploration of spices, loose-leaf teas, and culinary ingredients. In our conversation this week, Amy discusses expanding a franchise network while maintaining authenticity, lessons learned from the pandemic, and why immersive retail and education remain vital for the future of specialty loose-leaf tea. More in a minute, but first, this important message.
What happens when businesses along the tea supply chain get together and support women and children in tea communities? The Mother and Child-Friendly Seal for Responsible Business is creating long-term positive impacts, making your cup of Ceylon tea all the sweeter. Learn more at srilanka-motherandchildseal.org.
The disruption in the Strait of Hormuz is rapidly evolving from a shipping crisis into a systemic shock to the global tea trade, with consequences now spreading across origin markets, transit corridors, and input supply chains. At the center of the story is exposure. India's Tea Association estimates that 41% of India's tea exports move through the Hormuz-linked routes to the Gulf. Sri Lanka faces a similar dependency, with exporters warning of weekly losses of $10 to $15 million as vessels delay, reroute, or suspend shipments altogether. But the operational reality is becoming clearer and more severe. According to trade briefings circulating among Indian exporters this week, quote, maritime choke point dependency remains a strategic vulnerability for Indian tea. If instability persists, freight rates could rise by as much as 40%, insurance premiums will remain elevated, and transit times may extend by up to 25 days, end quote. It's not just a cost increase, it's a competitive shift. Indian tea risks losing ground at origins with shorter, more flexible routes into the Gulf markets, including East Africa. But East Africa is not insulated. Kenyan exporters are already warning of a potential loss of up to 20% of Middle East demand, particularly in key markets like Pakistan and the UAE. Auction liquidity is expected to tighten if cargoes cannot clear, and producers face rising exposure to delayed payments and unsold inventory. Sri Lanka, meanwhile, sits in a more precarious position. The country's orthodox tea sector is heavily export-dependent. With the Gulf routes disrupted, the industry faces immediate cash flow pressure, delayed shipment execution, and increasing uncertainty about buyer performance in high-risk markets like Iran. And this is where the story expands beyond the Gulf. The affected trade network stretches deep into Central and West Asia, including Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Iraq, markets that rely on transit corridors now under strain. These are not marginal destinations. They are volume-absorbing markets that play a critical role in balancing global supply. What appears to be a regional conflict is, in fact, a multi-corridor disruption affecting the wider tea trade architecture. But the more significant impact may still be upstream. Hormuz is not just an oil checkpoint. It is a conduit for fertilizer, sulfur, petrochemicals, and fuel inputs that underpin tea production itself. Roughly 1/3 of the global seaborne fertilizer trade moves through the Gulf. Nitrogen fertilizer production is heavily dependent on natural gas, accounting for up to 70% of the cost. As supplies tighten, input prices rise. At the same time, refinery-linked products, lubricants, base oils, and industrial chemicals are becoming more expensive and supplies less predictable. These are essential to factory operations, transportation fleets, and processing infrastructure. Layer onto that rising diesel costs, elevated bunker fuel prices, and war risk insurance premiums, and the result is a full-spectrum cost escalation. What emerges is a classic squeeze along the value chain. Higher input costs at origin, longer transit times to market, increased financial risk in destinations, and weakening buyer confidence. It's no longer just a logistics disruption. After 3 weeks, it's a structural stress test of the global tea supply chain. Business insight. The longer Hormuz remains unstable, the more likely it is that tea flows will begin to reroute, reprice, and rebalance, with lasting implications for origin competitiveness, trade relationships, and global market structure. India's interim trade framework with the United States could create a meaningful new opening for Indian tea exporters, though the opportunity remains conditional rather than assured. Reuters reports that tea is among the agricultural products expected to benefit if the framework advances as outlined, including potential duty-free access to the U.S. market. That matters because tariff relief can improve competitiveness, especially in price-sensitive categories, but it does not by itself create market share. The agreement is still politically contested. Farm unions and opposition parties in India have warned that parts of agriculture could face new pressure, while the government argues that protected staples remain insulated and that export-oriented categories such as tea could gain. So this is not yet a finished market access story. It is a policy discussion with commercial implications. For tea, the practical question is what exporters do with the opening if it materializes. The U.S. market rewards more than tariff advantage. Indian tea suppliers will still need to meet buyer expectations on quality, consistency, residue compliance, documentation, pack format, and dependable execution. In other words, improved access may help, but traction will still depend on commercial readiness. That is why this matters. At a time when sourcing strategies are already shifting under pressure from freight risk, geopolitical uncertainty, and tariff realignment, even a modest improvement in U.S. access could make Indian tea more competitive in select channels. Not across the board, not overnight, but enough to put the category back on the watch list for buyers and exporters alike. Business insight. This is a watch point, not a breakthrough. Tariff relief could open the door, but it will not move tea unless exporters are ready with compliance, consistency, and a market fit that works in the U.S. The real opportunity is not lower trade duties alone. It is the chance for prepared Indian suppliers to re-enter buyer conversations at the right moment. Dubai Multi-Commodity Center has unveiled further details of its Uptown district expansion, including plans for a mixed-use tower expected to rise above 600 meters. The proposed Megatall structure forms part of Phase 3 of the district's master plan, Executive Chairman and CEO Ahmed bin Sulayem said. Phase 1 delivered the 340-meter Uptown Dubai Tower and in the Central Plaza. Phase 2, comprising 2 Grade A office towers and 2 residential towers, is now under construction and scheduled for completion in late 2027 or early 2028. For tea traders, packers, and origin suppliers, the significance extends beyond the skyline ambition. The MCC's continued capital commitment reinforces Dubai's role as a long-horizon trade hub linking Africa, South Asia, and the Gulf. This matters because the DMCC Tea Center operates the Jebel Ali Free Zone, giving tea companies access to warehousing, blending, packing, and other value-added processing near one of the region's key logistics gateways. Quote, "This is vertical development as economic signaling," bin Sulayem wrote, arguing that scale alone will not determine the district's long-term success. Quote, "Scale is impressive, but what will define Uptown's success is how well commercial, residential, and community elements integrate to create sustained economic activity," he said, adding that mixed use creates value only when it supports talent density, business velocity, and long-term investor confidence, not just skyline presence, end quote. Business Insight. The announcement marks progress, not completion, but the development sequence now looks more complete. Phase 1 is delivered, Phase 2 is underway, and Phase 3 has a clearer anchor project. For businesses operating within DMCC's tea ecosystem, that strengthens the case that Dubai's trade infrastructure story is still expanding. The Week 11 Tea Price Report for the period ending March 13th is sponsored by the East Africa Tea Trade Association, owners of the Mombasa Tea Auction since 1956. Tea markets closed Week 11 with price discovery still driven more by quality and execution than by broad demand expansion. In Colombo, the latest broker-published weekly comparison available during this period showed sales averaged $3.68 per kilo for March 4th, down from $3.85 per kilo for the prior 25th February sale. Colombo softened on that measure even as better-made teas continued to attract support. In India, the weekly benchmark picture was incomplete. Disruptions in market demand are apparent due to widespread conflict in the Middle East and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The Board India published a North India average for the week ending 14 March, but the prior week was marked as not sold, so there's no clean week-over-week comparison. In East Africa, Mombasa remained active with fair general demand and selective absorption. Indonesia's market remained selective and quality-sensitive. Across origins, the key signal remains the widening gap between dependable manufacture and ordinary teas. Better-made teas continue to clear with disciplined competition, while plainer descriptions require price adjustment. Visit teajourney.pub and select Tea Price Report for a detailed regional breakdown, 6-month trade signals, and near-term outlook for Q1. That's the Tea Price Report for Week 11, ending 13 March 2026. And now, a word from this week's sponsor.
Hi, I'm Nish. I grew up in an organic tea farm and founded Nepal Tea Collective in 2016. Tea is not just a beverage for me, but a catalyst for social change, sustainably empowering hardworking artisans like my parents for the past 30 years. I'm on a mission to make the whole world aware of the goodness of Nepali teas and the good that comes from supporting growers in this remarkable land. If you haven't tasted Nepali teas yet, you're missing out. Our award-winning teas are making headlines. Find out why Visit Nepal Tea Collective's website to get a free sample of this extraordinary taste of the Himalayas. That's nepalteacollective.com. Or just send me an email at nish, Nish, at nepalteacollective.com. Cheers.
Few specialty retailers have expanded as successfully or as thoughtfully as the Spice and Tea Exchange. Founded during the depths of the 2008 financial crisis, the brand has grown from a single shop in St. Augustine, Florida, into a nationwide franchise with more than 90 locations. At the heart of that growth is CEO and co-founder Amy Freeman, whose approach combines entrepreneurial discipline with a strong belief in hospitality, storytelling, and sensory detail. Instead of standardizing stores into uniform outlets, Freeman has created a model that promotes local experimentation, community engagement, and hands-on exploration of spices, loose-leaf teas, and culinary ingredients. The company offers over 600 exclusive products curated by both in-house spice masters and spice masters at franchise locations. In this T-Biz Spotlight interview, Amy discusses expanding a franchise network while maintaining authenticity, lessons from the pandemic, and why immersive retail and education remain vital for the future of specialty loose-leaf tea. Amy Freeman, CEO and co-founder of the Spice and Tea Exchange, leads with a philosophy rooted in servant leadership, community connection, and empowering franchisees to create locally relevant offerings while maintaining brand standards. Under her guidance, the company has expanded its loose-leaf tea portfolio to over 85 varieties and continues to innovate across culinary teas, regional blends, and immersive retail experiences. This distinction reflects Amy's deep expertise in franchise development, operations, and brand growth, as well as her unwavering commitment to upholding the highest standards and best practices within the franchise community. Thanks so much, Amy, for joining us on this week's T-Biz podcast.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here.
You launched the Spice and Tea Exchange during the 2008 financial crisis and have since expanded to more than 90 locations. What leadership decisions or cultural principles allowed the brand to grow nationwide without losing the authenticity of the original shop?
In 2008, I was in the process of selling a business, and I knew what was happening in the world with regard to the finance and banking situation. That chapter was closing successfully, and I was really looking for what I was going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked into a little store in St. Augustine, Florida, and it was a sensory overload. I discovered so many things, cooking and being in restaurants and involved with what I thought at the time, a pretty good depth and breadth of knowledge with regard to spices. I was blown away, and I was able to open those jars and smell and taste. And before I knew it, I had $80 worth of spices on the counter in these little innocent little baggies. And it just went off that this is something that I would never do in the grocery store. I would never buy $80 worth of spices. I had a tremendous amount of variety and a reasonable package that if I didn't like it, I wouldn't have to use it. I could toss it and go on to the next. So that is how the Spice and Tea Exchange was born.
Many U.S. specialty retailers struggled during the pandemic. Your franchise not only survived, it continued to grow. How did you manage that period operationally?
The pandemic forced us to grow and really stretch. I had been saying that I am a franchisor first and foremost, and I serve the franchisees. We believe in servant leadership. That's truly my mission statement. And now it was time to walk the walk. And when the stores started closing down one by one, fortunately, I was at a meeting out in Utah with some very savvy franchisors, CEOs, founders, and a lot of people who were very innovative and were quick, nimble to respond. So I gained a tremendous amount of knowledge and realized that communication is king. And that if I could get ahead of this and communicate openly with my stores to tell them that I'm with you and telling them what we would do clearly, concisely, and letting them know that they are safe and we were going to get through this together. We pivoted by everyone's e-commerce blew up, or those who were fortunate enough to experience that. If you did well on e-com, it was going to grow exponentially. We gave the stores 20% of the revenues coming in from the website. And we actually raised that to 30% for a certain amount of time. And we hand wrote checks and sent them to them, sent the monies, the revenues from the stores, from the guests that they created, from their great customer service, who became members of our website. So then we added curbside service, and then we stayed very, very slow but steady.
Your stores are known for immersive retail, open jars, aromas, sampling, storytelling. What transforms a spice or tea shop into a memorable experience rather than just a place to buy ingredients?
That sensory experience ties back to the reason we started this business, and that is bringing back memories, educating. How do you even make a blend? As so many people are used to eating it, but how is that made up? What are the ingredients to create this? So it was a combination of sensory and education and inclusion, immersion. Every guest that comes in is a guest. We are welcoming them into the store. And we needed to make sure that we understood the people who were coming in. There are people who are experienced 5-star chefs. There are people who like to barbecue or grill. There are people who've never cooked or drank tea in their lives. There are young people, old people. The common denominator was make them feel safe and allow them to be part of the process. Whether that was touch, taste, smell, feel, talk, whatever it took. The beauty of our business is that you can take the jars, you can open them and smell them. And there's someone right there to ask and answer questions. Then we hand that jar over to the guest. If they're loving that aroma, we ask them to talk why they like it to the next guest coming in. So they feel like they're part of this. And that really opens people up and allows them to explore in a very different way. And I do believe that that is our secret. The store owners create small batches so they know every single ingredient that goes into those blends. So they're able to talk about them intelligently. They know this has shallots, this has onions, this has salt, this doesn't have salt, this is very spicy. So they're able to really be knowledgeable, and so is their team. And that really allows freedom of exploration when people come in and say, I have this ailment, or I need this, or I can't have that. Well, we'll make it for you without that. Or let's move you over to this section and let's try that. So it really is a partnership with our guests. So it is a partnership with us, with our franchisees, and it's our partnership with our franchisees with their guests.
One distinctive element of your model is localized product development, regional blends tailored to local taste. How does that work within the franchise system?
This is an art. So being the franchisor, you have to have guardrails and you have to have rules and regulations. But more importantly than that, your franchisee or your employee, whatever direction you're going, has to understand those and know what those are. It doesn't matter if you have them. If they don't know, aren't trained, aren't taught this. And so if you're going to scale, it's very, very important that you communicate clearly and concisely and ask for responses back. Do you understand this? Do you have any problems with this? Is there any concern? Let's talk about this. For a franchisor, it's really important to do that before they sign the franchise agreement. So we've become very good at that. So the process to become a franchisee of the Spice and Tea Exchange is a very long and strong process. And we are vetting, making sure that they're of the right culture and mix for us, because we feel that's essentially a 10-year marriage. It's got to be right for them, equally the same for us. So with that being said, these guardrails are in place, and then we start, let's learn all of our blends. Let's make all of the blends. Let's experience selling them. There's a wide array, and it will cover most palates, most needs. However, as we started growing, regionality became a thing in every aspect. In tea, types of tea, matcha caught on in California and the West Coast much earlier than it did on the East Coast. There are, spicy Cajun in New Orleans. So there's all of these different things that are happening. And so we really said there's an art and a science to this business. Here's the science. We gave you the rules. Now here's the art. Let's see what your guests are asking for. What is trending? We use partners. We use all different types of research to see what is coming, what's trending, what's coming. TV influences that. Instagram influences that. So our franchisees are the front line. And so they're starting to hear these requests way before we do in Florida, in St. Augustine, Florida. So we listen to our partners, and they say, everyone's coming in and they want vanilla lavender tea. It's the latest, greatest craze. All right, let's look at that. Is that sustainable in your area? Is that nationwide? Is this an isolated pocket that this is trending? I'll give you an example. Prickly pear in Arizona, prickly pear tea. It's not going to go over in Peoria, Illinois. I guarantee you. But in Sedona, in all of these stores that we have there, it's going to be hot, right? So we try it out. We test it slowly. We make sure that we perfect it. We make sure that the franchisee understands what they are selling, and we allot a certain amount of wall space for them to have 2 to 3 products that are local. And after 90 days, we see how the sales are going. And then we introduce it to the franchise system and say, who wants to try this out? So we have a slow roll. And then we decide whether that's going to be a limited time offer, if that's going to be a staple on our shelf. And then we give the franchisee credit. If they create a blend or if they bring something in, they love that and love to boast and brag. And 99% of the time, that regional area or store, that's their highest sale product. And they love to tout that in the system. And we give space for that to happen, and we cheer them on.
You're part of a growing group of women leading companies in tea and specialty beverages. How do you see women entrepreneurs shaping this sector?
This is a very difficult question for me, but I wanted to really have this conversation with you. We're a women-led business. It's difficult. I grew up in a man's world. I'm very comfortable in that. It's not a negative or a positive for me. I believe as women, for the most part, we are natural nurturers. Business is hard. There's sometimes I wish I was a man, or I wish I had more men, because they just think differently than we do. And sometimes in very difficult situations, we need that. We need that blend. So being a woman-run company, my business partner, Penny, and I are we did not know each other prior to this, but we are leading this company, and we are the best of friends. And we have a tremendous relationship, and we lean on each other quite a bit. It's hard. Like I said, it is difficult, but if you lean into your natural talents, I'm a mother of 3. I'm a Midwestern girl. I believe in integrity and I'm very humble and I believe in fairness. That's great. But what does it get you in business? I can lean into those talents and then I surround myself with people who have areas of expertise that I don't have. I will say, well, let's do this. And I had to surround myself with people who are like, nope, this is the way we do it. Women have those capabilities. I do believe that women have an affinity with tea and they really are able to taste it and admire it and nurture it more so than men. I think a lot of men love tea and appreciate it, but I think this is a business that is easy for women to get into. It's fun to learn about. It hits the educational, the research, it's old as time. There's a lot there. There's a lot of fulfillment. My company is not a women-led company by design. It just happens to be that way. And I have tremendously strong, powerful women in my company and men too.
Intrigued by what you heard in today's podcast? Would you like to learn more from our global network of Tea-Biz journalists and tea experts? Remember to visit the Tea-Biz website for more comprehensive coverage. That's www.tea-biz.com. Thanks for listening. Farewell till next week.
Produced by Audavita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.